My name is Sandra Santos, and I am the proud principal of World Language Middle School for Columbus City Schools.
You're still upstairs?
On the first semester, we stayed in contact with the parents.
Can you bring my bag? I need my charger.
You can call us
Just grab my
anytime.
black bag.
That's what parents, that's what they want.
Can bring it down to the basement on the way out. Yeah. Maybe I just charger in there. Okay, thank you.
Yes, it's on. Good evening and welcome to the Academic and Facility Alignment Committee meeting. Let's call the meeting to order. Before we move into roll call, let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. And seeing that we have a full house, we will turn it over to the clerk to take attendance.
Dr. Pierce,
Present.
Ms. Adair,
Present.
Mr. Cole,
I am here.
Mr. Ali, Mr. Bean,
Here.
Ms. Turner,
Present.
Dr. Kellogg,
Here.
Ms. Kinney,
Here.
Dr. Levine,
Here.
Mr. Robertson,
Here.
Ms. Whitfield.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Committee members, our agenda this evening will include presentations from the administration regarding school lottery and transportation. The presentation and discussions surrounding transportation will be limited to its relationship to school lottery. Again, the presentation and discussions surrounding transportation will be limited to its relationship to school lottery. It will include the shortage of bus drivers and the need to look differently at how we transport our students. As you know, there is pending litigation regarding the district's transportation of non-public school students. Again, please be reminded that this is not an issue that will be discussed today. Again, please limit any transportation questions to the task at hand. We will then move forward to spend some time talking about our framework to explore recommendations when they are brought forth from our administration. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Clerk, please, with the motion in a second, clerk, please call the roll.
Dr. Pierce,
Yes.
Ms. Adair,
Yes.
Mr. Cole,
Yes.
Mr. Bean,
Yes.
Ms. Turner,
Yes.
Dr. Kellogg,
Yes.
Ms. Kinney,
Yes.
Dr. Levine,
Yes.
Mr. Robertson,
Yes.
Ms. Whitfield.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Excellent. At this time, we will also take a vote to approve our meeting minutes from our last meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting?
So moved.
Do we have a motion and a second? Clerk, please call the roll.
Dr. Pierce,
Yes.
Ms. Adair,
Yes.
Mr. Cole,
Yes.
Mr. Bean,
Yes.
Ms. Turner,
Yes.
Dr. Kellogg,
Yes.
Ms. Kinney,
Yes.
Dr. Levine,
Yes.
Mr. Robertson,
Yes.
Ms. Whitfield.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you so much. We will now move forward with our school lottery update. We will have a presentation from the administration regarding the district school choice and lottery system. The presentation will be given by Ms. Tanya Freeman, the Director of Enrollment for Columbus City Schools. Welcome, Ms. Freeman.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for giving me this opportunity tonight to share the history of the lottery and how the lottery works with you.
I'm gonna put a cord here, just be careful.
There we go. Well, having a little bit of technical difficulties. There we go. In 1954, the Supreme Court in the Brown versus the Board of Education case ruled unanimously that racial segregation of children in public schools was unconstitutional and that education is a right which must be made available to all on equal terms. However, it was not until over a decade later, in 1967, that Columbus City Schools made a serious attempt to better integrate the district. It was then that the Columbus Plan was implemented, which allowed for the integration of Black and non-Black students to apply to transfer to schools that had programs of interest or were predominantly the other race. However, this process was not widely selected by the CCS families. In 1977, U.S. District Judge Robert Duncan found that the Columbus Plan was inadequate. As part of CCS's plan to comply with a 1977 court order to desegregate Columbus schools, the Columbus Board of Education announced that many students would be bused to other neighborhoods beginning in the fall of 1978, and that certain schools would be closed. In the summer of 1978, a temporary stay was placed on the court order, and the desegregation plan was postponed. However, in 1979, a massive busing program was implemented, which was mandated by Judge Duncan to be funded by the city and the state due to negligence on both parts. About 35,000 students out of the 78,000 enrolled were assigned to attend a different school and would be transported by buses to other schools within the city. In 1977, when CCS announced that students would be bused to other schools and that some schools would be closed, an innovative principal and a few teachers devised a plan to save Columbus North by developing an idea for a magnet school that would focus on independent study and a rigorous curriculum. Nearly 700 students, mostly freshmen and sophomore, applied to attend this magnet school. Most of them were from the Columbus North attendance area. However, when the stay was implemented, Columbus North was saved and the magnet school was put on a shelf. In 1978, the idea did come to fruition as a half-day program at Mohawk School with 100 students. In 1979, it became the first 100% alternative lottery school in Columbus City School District, with classes commencing on the top floor of McGuffey Elementary in 1980. This is the point where the idea of the lottery began. Lottery applications were completed and a dual lottery system for Black and non-Black students was utilized in lottery placements in order to maintain racial balance. 6 other 100% lottery alternative schools were added for the 1979-1980 school year. Each school had a specific program which allowed it to be titled as an alternative school. This provided families options as many students were being transported outside of the neighborhood due to district assignments. In 1982-83 school year, Berwick, Duxbury Park, and Monroe were added as 100% alternative lottery schools. It's interesting to note that if there were not enough applications from a given race to fill all the seats that were available, they would not cross racial lines to fill the seats, and seats would remain empty. Although there were several alternative school options for parents at this time, many seats went unfilled due to the need to provide racial balance. During the 1987-88 school year, many other schools were added to the list of alternative schools with specialized programs for which families could submit a lottery application. However, some of the schools also had an assigned population and could accept lottery applications from students who resided in designated regions. These are known as regional alternatives. In an effort to try to provide the same program in various parts of the city, several, but not all schools, had a sister school that offered the same programming. The district was now offering so many different programming opportunities, a 7-part series ran in the Columbus Dispatch to explain the alternative school programs and the process for applying. Lottery applications were completed and submitted by families wishing to attend these highly sought-after alternative schools. Applications were then transported to each school, spread out on a table based on the race, and then they were shuffled for the lottery draw. The draw was performed in front of an audience of parents and students, staff, and media. Names were recorded in the order they were drawn, and offers and wait lists were manually maintained. The allocation of Black and non-Black vacancies were based on approximating the district-wide Black enrollment at 46%. During the 1993-94 school year, all schools, alternative and conventional, were open to the lottery, though placement was still restricted by the racial diversity issues. This means that 100% lottery schools and schools with an assigned population were all lottery schools at this point. In the summer of 1995, the CCS School Board granted an allowance of placement continuations after non-positive racial balance applications were exhausted. It is at this point that the lottery begins to look like what we see today. There have been many schools over the years that have changed alternative focused or have changed back to non-alternative options. On the screen, you can see our current alternative schools and what they currently have defined as the alternative focus. Now, with these schools, some of them are 100%, and some of them do have assigned population. In the fall of 1995, 4 plans known as the Steps of Change were presented and discussed in several community forums. Each plan addressed 4 goals. 1, setting high academic standards. 2, creating healthy learning environments. 3, giving parents a greater choice in their children's school. And 4, using tax dollars effectively. Plan 4 was selected in late January 1996. The plan divided all of Columbus City Schools into 6 communities and stipulated that students can go to the nearest open and available school, meaning the school of address. Students could apply for other conventional choice schools within their community and receive transportation to schools within their community or to citywide alternatives, provided they lived more than 2 miles from the school. So, for example, if an elementary or middle school student lives in the dark purple area on the screen, they can apply to go to any school in that dark purple area or in the green Center City. And they will receive transportation. If they are in the dark purple and they apply to a school in the light purple, transportation is not provided for them. This is the same transportation plan that we still follow today. So this same 6 communities is used today for transportation purposes. There have been many changes over the years to the lottery application process. I am old enough that I was part of the second round, the second year that lottery was implemented, and I can remember sitting at Georgian Heights Elementary when they pulled names and they spread them all out and literally sitting like this saying, oh, I hope my name's pulled, I hope my name's pulled, and it was for Franklin Alternative. And so I got to go there, and then years later, I applied to go to Columbus Alternative High School, which I'm a very proud graduate of. So the lottery is in my blood. I've been part of it for a very long time. But in those days, paper applications, like I said, were filled out, turned in, separated, transported, randomly drawn by hand, and then recorded on paper. Principals were then responsible for calling the lottery office and letting them know, hey, I can take another student. I can take another student. Everything was call and mark off on paper at that time. In 2003, a CCS employee, Chris Kell, wrote a computer program that allowed paper applications to be keyed by staff into a computer that would randomly assign them a lottery number. The school choice staff would determine the number of available seats, and phone calls would be made to make the offers. It could literally take weeks and weeks to fill the available seats because the school choice office had to reach out to each and every parent and make sure that they knew that they had an offer and then wait for them to respond. Then in 2014-15 school year, I was lucky enough to work with the application development team to develop the current program that is housed within the parent portal. It was ready to be implemented during the 2016-17 school year. This gives parents and guardians the opportunity to apply for the lottery online. They can see their lottery results, they can see their wait list As it changes, they can accept and decline offers, all from the comfort of their home. Offers are made using text messages, emails, and auto dialers to every family. Families can then go into their parent portal and accept or decline the offer. This program also pulls the enrollment numbers from Infinite Campus, making it easy to calculate the number of available seats. While there have been many changes to the application process, the premise of the lottery is essentially unchanged. And here you can see what the parents see if they have applied. You can see the lottery waitlist number, the deadline they have to accept. It's as simple as pushing the accept or decline button. They have 2 days to accept the offer. If they do not accept the offer, then it's given to the next student on the wait list. Parents and guardians have the opportunity to submit up to 3 lottery applications. All on-time applications for each grade and school are randomly assigned a number between 1 and the total number of applicants. Offers are made for the numbers of seats available based on lottery capacity limits. It's important to note that lottery capacity limit is different than neighborhood capacity limit. We can't give away all the seats at a school that has an assigned population. So for lottery capacity at non-100% schools, it's 22-1 for kindergarten until after school starts, and then it increases to 24-1, and is district capacity -3 per classroom for 1st through 5th grade. So we save 3 seats in each classroom for neighborhood kids that move into the area. 6th and 9th grade is 80% of the total capacity, and 7th, 8th, 10th, and 12th is 90% of total capacity. So we won't make offers if they are above that, because at the 6th grade, we see an increase of students coming back to Columbus City Schools, and at 9th grade, so that's why that is an 80% and the others are 90%. Once the lottery has been completed, parents will receive an email and an auto dialer with any offers. It is vital that parents ensure their information is correct in the parent portal so they can be contacted with their offers. If we don't have a valid email or phone number, there's not a way for us to contact the families. Through the school choice application in the parent portal, parents can view their waitlist numbers at any time after the lottery has been ran and accept or decline offers. As seats are vacated by students, additional offers are made for available seats. So it's a big, like chess game. One person leaves, we fill that seat with another student, so it's constant movement. Late applications are added to the bottom of the lottery wait list in the date-time order of receipt. So after the lottery draw has taken place, if students enroll in the district or submit a late application, it just goes to the bottom of the list. The odds of receiving an offer to at least one of the schools in which they have applied are favorable, as approximately 68% of families receive an offer to at least one school, while several receive an offer to 2 or all 3 of their options that they have put down. There are a few factors that parents should consider before accepting a lottery offer. The first thing to consider is that once a lottery offer is accepted, all other applications are canceled, and the seat at the student's previous school or their home school is released. Therefore, families cannot simply change their mind and go back to their previous school, because as soon as they vacate that seat, we're going to offer it to another student. The next thing to consider is there is never a guarantee that siblings will be kept together. So if they are lotterying 3 students out, I might have room at 2nd grade and 3rd grade, but I might not have room for the 5th grade sibling. So there's never a guarantee that we can keep siblings together. After the initial lottery responses are processed, any seats not accepted at the elementary level are offered to siblings on the wait list in the order that the siblings were drawn. Once all siblings on the wait list have been placed, then we return to the non-sibling and resume. At total 100% alternative middle and high schools, any seats not accepted will be offered to siblings on the wait list in an alternating pattern, as a sibling and then the general wait list, sibling, general wait list. Again, there's not a guarantee that siblings can be kept together if a family accepts a lottery offer. The next thing that families should consider is their transportation needs. Typically, a student must live further than 2 miles from the school to receive a school bus. If elementary or middle school applicants are applying outside of their region, transportation is the responsibility of the parent. And on the lottery application, if they are applying outside, it gives them a warning that says, there will not be transportation provided. Are you willing to provide your own transportation? And they have to click yes or no. If they click no, it removes that as an option for them. At the high school level, it's important to think about transportation needs for after-school things such as sports or activities. In an effort to increase enrollment in 1998-99, inter-district open enrollment applications began being accepted. This process continues today and allows students who reside outside of CCS attendance boundaries to apply to schools within CCS that have seats remaining after CCS students are placed. We continue to receive many applications every year from students who reside outside of the CCS boundaries that wish to become part of Columbus City Schools. The majority of students who move outside of CCS during the school year are approved to remain for the rest of the year as long as they submit the inter-district open enrollment application to remain. As a district, we continue to be at capacity for our special ed and ESL services. So students requiring these services often have to enroll in their district of address because we need the seats for our CCS students. During the 2006-2007 school year, an automatic placement was approved for students to transition from Ames to Fort Hays in order for students to maintain the arts impact focus. As not all parents wanted the automatic placement, it was decided that for the 2010-11 school year, that families would submit a reservation form to secure their placement. During the same year, reservations were approved for Columbus Spanish, Ecole Kenwood, and Fifth Avenue to reserve placement at Columbus International due to the foreign language programming for the 2011-12 school year. Berwick was approved to submit reservations to Eastmoor Academy due to the science and biomed focus, and Duxbury was approved to have a reservations to Ames for the arts focus. We currently have all the same reservations with the exception of the language program. Spanish Immersion and Ecole Kenwood now have the reservation to World Language, and World Language has a reservation into Columbus North International. Fifth Avenue, as you know, is now closed. Reservation applications are available in the parent portal for the students who are attending the schools who are eligible. In 2013, the superintendent requested that there be a method in which parents could request the student to be enrolled in the school of address without having to go through the lottery. Thus, the request to return to homeschool application was implemented. So currently, we have students who are attending a school other than their homeschool, maybe through lottery. Maybe they moved halfway through the year and chose to stay at the school where they were, but now they have a new homeschool. So there's lots of different reasons they might be at a different school and choose to return to their homeschool. So they can submit that application for the following year, starting in January, to return to their homeschool. During the same year, committee meetings with parents, district administration, and district staff were occurring in regards to recommendations about implementing a selective admissions process for Cause and Eastmoor. The selective admissions pilot was approved by the CCS School Board to begin the winter of 2008. This remained as a pilot until 2014. Unfortunately, the selective admissions pilot was in violation of law. So in 2014, CCS submitted a plan to what was then ODE, now ODEW, asking for a waiver that would allow us to have a limited selective admission process for up to 20% of available seats. ODE granted the waiver to allow selective admissions process to Duxbury, Ames, Fort Hays, Cause, and Eastmoor. Columbus Afrocentric was added in 2017 after presenting to ODE. Parents can apply for these schools if their students meet certain qualifications. They will get an invitation to apply for selective admissions. To be eligible for selective admissions to Cause or Eastmoor, Students must be a current 8th grade student on track for 9th grade entrance at high school for the next school year, and be a resident of the Columbus City School District, and have had a grade point average of 3.0 or higher in the 7th grade, and be identified as gifted and talented in either specific academic or superior ability. This selective admissions is a true separate lottery and is held prior to the regular lottery. So students who are applying to cause in Eastmore, if they are part of selective admissions, they kind of have a double chance of getting in there. If they don't get in through selective admissions for the 20% of the seats, they may get in through the regular lottery. Selective admissions for Duxbury, Ames, and Fort Hays is not actually a lottery, but an audition in which a rubric is used. Selective invitations for these schools are based on talent in the arts. For all 3 schools, students must be identified as gifted in one or more area of visual or performing arts and be residents of Columbus City Schools. To be eligible for Columbus Afrocentric selective admissions, students must meet the following criteria. They must be a current 5th through 8th grade student on track for the following school year, and be a resident of Columbus City School District, and have had a grade point average of 2.5 or higher for all the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and have one of the following: scored on grade level for both reading and math on the iReady test, or scored on grade level for both reading and math on an equivalent assessment. In 2018, in an effort to increase participants in the Air Force ROTC, an Air Force Junior ROTC lottery was implemented. Families submit their application, a lottery draw is held, and offers are made based on the lottery number. If an offer is made and accepted, all other lottery applications are withdrawn. An acceptance of an offer from the Division of School Choice will automatically enroll the student as a full-time student at Fort Hays Arts and Academic High School. However, the number of seats for ROTC is determined after the reservations and selective admissions are processed. With so many avenues to enter Fort Hays, there are not many seats available for general lottery at the 9th grade level. In order to be part of the Air Force Junior ROTC's high standards, as spelled out in the cadet guide, if the student drops the Air Force Junior ROTC from their schedule, they are returned to their home school because they got into Fort Hays for that program. Coming soon, which this year, the selection for the Career Center placements will be handled via the school choice lottery. So this year, for the first time, students will be able to apply for their Career Center through the lottery, through the parent portal, and a lottery will be ran. They'll be able to see their wait list numbers, their offers, everything just like the general lottery. Should the board decide in the future that schools will be closed or consolidated, a preferential lottery will be implemented for students who are currently attending the school that is closing. This will be a lottery draw for available seats prior to the general lottery draw. We have done this in the past for schools that have closed. The school choice process is a very popular program. For the 2024-2025 school year, we have received 22,500 applications, representing 8,400 students, because remember, each student can submit up to 3 applications. This number is representative of all the school choice application types. It's interesting to note that to date, 68% of applicants have received an offer to at least one of the schools for which they applied. However, only approximately 60% of those offered a seat actually accept the placement. Parents decline offers for multiple reasons. However, often they decline it in hopes that they will get one of their other selections that they put on the application. As you can see from the number of interested students not placed each year, the top 10 schools are pretty consistent, although Afrocentric and Cause seem to take turns being in the top 10. I think it's important to note that included in the waitlist numbers for cause and Afrocentric are students who submitted an application for 11th and 12th grade. It is currently the practice that these two schools do not accept students at the 11th and 12th grade due to the programming that they have at the school. Several of these schools with high interests are not currently able to increase the number of students they accept due to the building space constraint. It's important to note that the facility capacity is based off of square footage, but allocation capacity is based off the number of teachers assigned to the building. So while some schools could accept more students if additional allocations are added to the school, other schools do not physically have the space to accommodate additional students. Over the years, various superintendents have approved different schools to have exceptions made for lottery openings. Cause and Afrocentric, as we said, do not accept 11th and 12th graders. Columbus Spanish Immersion and ECHO World Language, students must be assessed for their English or for their language acquisition after the 2nd grade before being made an offer. And then if a family would like to apply for a regional alternative school that is not part of their region, they can do a sister school transfer, but only if we clear the wait list of the students who are eligible to apply for that school in that region. So we get families who live in the northeast or northwest community that would like to apply to go to Stewart, but Stewart is the sister school for Oakland Park. So they're eligible to apply for Oakland Park, not Stewart. We can do a sister school transfer if they get into Oakland Park and we clear all the students off of Stewart's wait list, we can do that sister school transfer. Some important dates for this school year. The School Choice Fair will be Thursday, January 9th from 6 to 7:30. This is an opportunity for our schools to really showcase all the great things that they have going on to parents. It is a virtual that parents can just click in and meet with staff and see all the things that the school has to offer and set up appointments to go and view the school. The Elementary School Choice Fair will be Thursday, February 6th from 6 to 7:30. High school and middle school lottery applications will open on January 6th and run through February 28th. The elementary school lottery applications will begin on February 3rd and run through March 31st. Both of those are to be part of the lottery draw. Again, if we have late applications that come in on, let's say, April 1st, they're automatically added to the bottom of the wait list in the date-time order of receipt. Selective admissions, the invitations to apply will be sent out on January 8th, with the deadline being Friday, January 31st. Request to return to homeschool will open on January 6th and run through third quarter till Friday, March 21st. Reservations will, the invitation to submit a reservation will go out on January 6th and the deadline January 31st. And ROTC applications January 6th through February 21st. And that concludes. If anyone has questions, I'll be happy to answer.
So before we open up the floor for questions, thank you so much for that presentation. Colleagues, this presentation is meant to level set, to share information with you all about our lottery process. So as we open up the floor for questions, I encourage you to ask questions that will deepen your understanding of our lottery process. We understand that to this point, you are getting a lot of information. You've, in our last meetings, learned about our goals, our guardrails, our facilities, some of our academic programs, and now you have learned about a quite historical, complex lottery process that happens within our district. So again, we're going to open up the floor for questions. Please have those questions really relate to a deeper understanding of how the process operates. Board Member Adair.
Thank you. I want to say, I do have a question, but I want to say a couple things. Why this topic is really important. So when we, as we learned, as the chair said, this is a very historical process, and the reason it was implemented, those reasons don't really exist today. And so as we, as a school board in 2024, are really concerned about the question of equity and access and considering our operations and the way that we are choosing to transport our children across the city and what that has done to our communities, that's really the question that we have to address, because it is board policy that sets this in motion. And so as we are understanding that the lottery and the way that it is functioning, they're doing an amazing job at it. As a parent, I participate in it. We got our lottery choice. But the underlying question is, does this still work for where our district wants to go in terms of looking through that lens of equity and ensuring that we do have the resources for every student in every community? And so just thinking through that lens, it's really important that this committee kind of think through that, because what we'll really be looking at is board policy around enrollment and lottery, and we'll learn in a minute how this touches transportation and causes some problems there. My question is, you mentioned that you had a map. You put the map up and you were talking about transportation in particular, and how you said if you live in the dark.
So we're going back to the purple, to the
Yeah, the dark-
geographic map where you have the areas
six.
outlined.
And it's something we still do today. I just want to make sure, because
Sorry, I'm trying to.
it's okay. Because you said that if a student applies, family applies within their color, they get transportation, or to a citywide lottery school, you get transportation. And if you apply out of your color, you do not get transportation.
For elementary and middle school, yes.
That's my question. For elementary and middle school. For high school, we are open lottery across the entire city, correct?
Correct.
Right,
As
so
long as you live more than 2 miles from the school.
more than 2 miles. And that too, the 2 miles, that's something that is part board policy as well. So thank you for clarifying that.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you for that question, Board Member Adair. So again, colleagues, we want you to gain a deeper understanding of the process before the question is brought to us to make a decision around not just the question that has been posed around transportation, but also the process and how we do it itself. So right now, again, want to open up the floor for questions to help you all gain a deeper understanding of the process and what has been presented. Any questions? Yes. Board Member Bean.
I have a question.
Committee Member
So,
Bean.
Yeah, do we see a further propensity of lottery students in areas of, areas where people live farther away from their assigned school? Like for example, if you start getting 3 miles, 4 miles away from your assigned elementary school, do people living further away from their assigned school, do we see more of those people applying for lotteries just simply because transportation is going to be an issue no matter what for those students? So just curious about that. Obviously, we'll be getting into the transportation piece a little bit later, but maybe, along those lines both.
Great question.
That is a great question. To be honest, I don't have that data. I can tell you the majority of students who apply to leave their region are in the northeast and east communities. They're mostly applying to the 100% lottery schools, and those are kind of scattered throughout, but when we break it down by the regions of how we see regions now, it's Region 6 that we see a lot of applications to, and into the northwest community.
Thank you so much. Additional questions, again, to help understand this process? Committee Member Kinney?
Thank you. Am I on or? Okay, now
Is
it's
it
on,
green?
sorry. So my question is actually, I'm thinking back of the first entry, so going into elementary school, the lottery process. And I'm speaking also from I remember before the parent portal lottery process was. So I remember that process, and I remember as a new parent about how I didn't know. And I've talked with parents who have that struggle, even with the parent portal as it is. It's still, you have to input it. So when you are going for middle or high school, you're already a parent, you're already in the system, you already know how to use parent portal, you've already checked the grades. But for the incoming parent, the adults who are trying to get their kids in, because once you go into kindergarten, you're making friends and you're kind of staying. But it's that first thing. Is there any education in the public or assistance of this is what the parent portal is and how to do this when you don't have a student yet? What's that?
Yes, so when families do their enrollment with Columbus City Schools, the enrollment specialist sends them their parent portal information sheet that allows them to sign up for parent portal. We do have lots of videos on our website that explains to them how to do that. There's also in their Welcome to Columbus City Schools email that has their parent portal letter, there's a link to those videos that show them. We also have staff on site at Central Enrollment that will help parents with their parent portal. We have a parent portal email and phone line that parents can call to get help with that.
But with that, it's the timing, because you shared this, so with elementary school, there's a January date?
So with elementary school, lottery opens in February. We start enrollment for the 25-26 school year. We'll start that in January, on January 6th.
Okay. But there isn't like a public, like, hey, this is.
So we do, for the school choice lottery and, for the school choice fairs, we work with communications.
Okay.
And they do radio ads and like messenger, put things in the messengers, and communications works on getting the word out to our community and of course it's on our website and all of that kind of good stuff.
Great
If I
question,
can
Board
add-
Member Cole.
Thank you, I'm sorry. It is distributed throughout the organization, literally from top to bottom. So even us as board members, from the superintendent to board members, will mention that this is a calendar item to be very seriously considered. It's coming up, and then, as she stated, it's distributed throughout the entire organization.
Great questions and dialogue. Additional questions for this topic? Yes, Dr. Kellogg.
Two parts. First, I'm going to try and confirm what I think I understand, and then the second is kind of a question. So the first one is the variety of different magnet programs distributed throughout various schools. So location of the program relative to where I live will determine whether or not I can get transportation. So you could have two families both interested in the same program at a particular school. One would have access to transportation based on where they live, and another one would not. Is that correct?
So kind of yes and kind of no. So so if it's 100% lottery, no matter where you live in the district, you're able to get transportation. If it's a regional lottery school, then students who live in those regions that are eligible to apply will get transportation if they're eligible to apply. If they're not eligible to apply and we do a sister school transfer, then no, they would not get transportation.
Second part of that is program design. So historically, where did the decisions about what kind of programs we're offering come from? Is there a policy piece to that? There was a logic model relative to what we see students needing, or is it just, it happened over time?
So I can tell you historically from what I know is that often it was a principal or a group of parents or someone doing a proposal to the board saying, hey, we would like to see this implemented in a school. And maybe it's in my school if it's a principal and the parents from that school. So they would do a presentation that the board would, take under consideration.
A Cole Kenwood, for example, would be such a program. And it did happen over time. So you've been a superintendent. You understand how these regimes tend to work. Folks like yourself come in and you say, Eureka, this is what I want to see happen. And then you rally the troops to ensure that that happens. Once you leave, you found greener grass, greener pastures somewhere else. Maybe those who succeed you see the value of what is there and then invest further in it, and then maybe that doesn't happen. But there are programs that have been sustainable over time because of that.
Great question. Additional questions on this topic? Yes, Ms. Turner.
Is my mic on? Okay. I kind of want to circle back to Board Member Adair. You highlighted access and equity. You did mention special education students. We know lottery students are for the gifted, but special education, that's my trigger word. So what is the actual process for students who have special education? You did mention that at most of the lottery schools, you're at capacity. Can you explain or elaborate?
And that's for inter-district open enrollment, for students who do
Okay.
not reside within Columbus City Schools. But the process for special education and our ESL families, when they apply, in the application, it'll ask, do you require special education, or does your child have an IEP, I think is how it's worded. If they select yes, it has a drop-down, and it shows all the schools that have the programs, and it'll say, this school has hearing impaired, high intent, whatever. And so it gives them a list of the schools that have the program so that parents can make an informed decision, oh, these schools have the programs that I'm looking for, and not have to waste a lottery option on a school that doesn't have that program, because we want every child to succeed, obviously, and we can't put them in a program or in a school that doesn't have the resources to,
Yes.
best serve them. And same for ESL. If they require ESL services and they select yes, it'll show them a list of all the schools that have the ESL program.
Okay, so certain services or resources are not at all schools. So are there like targeted, I would say, regional schools within each region that have those resources? So say a student who may live in Region 2, there's no lottery schools for this particular student. They're dyslexic. They would have to do the whole sister transfer process.
So special ed will look, with a lot of the students, they look at their IEP, and if their homeschool cannot accommodate them, they will place the students in different schools. For the lottery, every region has schools that have high incident, MD, ED classes, so that they have something to select from. But not every school can service every child.
Got you, thank you.
Great questions. Thank you so much. We have one more question from Dr. Robinson.
Soon to be, thank you.
Yes, we're putting it out
This
there.
draft, but we'll get it done. Yeah, I had a question about, back to what Beth was talking about, this parent portal. You've mentioned it many, many times. And as I look through the lens of equity, I'm looking at these ESL parents. Is there a human being to reach out to help them?
Yes, our ESL department does a great job with that. At Central Enrollment, we have some of our family ambassadors and our ESL support there to help families with that. We also have it translated into different languages that they can download and get the information, in the different languages. But most of the families we see for ESL, they will come into the Central Enrollment Center, and we have folks there. And we use a program called Propio that we can just key up. It has over 300 languages, and a person comes on the screen that can help us make sure that they feel comfortable and that they are being serviced with their own language, so that there's no miscommunication there.
Thank you.
Great question. Board Member Coe.
Thank you. In addition to that, we have a device that we've equipped schools with, maybe as many as 2 per building, that actually translates for a person as well. I'm not sure if that's the same thing or not.
Yeah, so I think you're talking about Pocket Talk?
Pocket Talk, thank you. So we have that device as well as a major support in the building. This is the newest addition that we've been able to make that incorporates that technology into a school building and allows for immediate access in terms of language barrier.
Excellent. Thank you all for these great questions. We have 2 more exciting topics on the agenda, and so Mr. Woods is anxiously, patiently waiting for his turn. So we will now.
Looking forward to this opportunity to tell our story in transportation.
All right, so we will now have a presentation from the administration regarding the district's school transportation system. The presentation will be given by Mr. Maurice Woods, the Director of Operations for our Columbus City Schools. Again, please note that as we are discussing transportation in our school lottery, these presentations and discussions surrounding transportation will be limited to the relationship that transportation has with school lottery, the presentation that we just had. Again, ensure that as you're thinking about your questions, because I encourage you to write those down as we're going through the presentation, as you think about your questions, there's pending litigation regarding the district's transportation of non-public school students. Please be mindful that this is not an issue that will be addressed today. Keep your questions surrounding our school choice, our school lottery, and transportation topics. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction, Board Member Pierce. So I want to start just by reiterating the fact that there is some litigation occurring, and we were actually revising and updating this presentation up until the very last minute. So I want to thank and apologize to Carl Williams and his team. I'm trying to manage the different versions. That's one of the reasons why we wanted to make sure that you had the most up-to-date version. And what you will see on the presentation in front of you is that version. I'm presenting here on behalf of my Executive Director of Transportation, Rodney Stufflebeam. He's having some health concerns, and we wish him a speedy recovery. I also want to acknowledge two of the managers in the department, Michelle Brooks and Timothy Hutchinson, who do an amazing and outstanding job in the transportation department. So I just wanted to acknowledge them and give them their roses. So I'm going to take about 10 minutes. I'm trying to multitask here, so. So I'm going to take about 10 minutes to take you on a short journey. And the journey is going to talk about the past, the present, and the future for transportation. We're going to talk a little bit about cost escalation over the last few years. We're going to park a little bit on cost structure misalignment and opportunities for realignment. We'll do some benchmarking. You'll see how we compare to other districts. I think there's a compelling story about where we've been in the past as it relates to our cost structure. And then we'll continue to reiterate and talk about the ongoing driver shortage, which continues to plague us and other districts, and the number of charter schools that we're working with. And we have great partnerships with our charter schools, so I just want to acknowledge that. And then we're going to shift a little bit to the present. I want to talk a little bit about some recent efforts that was made by the team, some continuous improvement efforts. That is our theme for this year and the next few years going forward. We're going to touch on contracted vendors and how we leverage them in our model. And then we're going to close by talking a little bit about we believe that the path forward involves both short-term and long-term considerations. And then we'll pause for questions. So if we talk a little bit about the big picture. So transportation is a complex organization. It's been complex. It's complex in every district I work for. Size is important, but even, you know, some of the smaller, the mid-sized to small districts have complexity in their transportation system. For us, we have a budget of approximately $75 million. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. We route approximately 38,000 students. That number has been relatively consistent over the last few years. Our ridership, that's the number of seats that are in, the number of students that are in seats during a certain time of the year when we're audited on our ridership, so that number will be different from what's routed. And then we have approximately 473 routes. We'll hit on that a little bit. And we have we have 6 terminals that we route out of. One of the terminals focuses specifically on vans and special education. And we have approximately 843 buses in our fleet. That's not the number of buses that are on the street every day, but that's the number of buses that are in our fleet. Financially speaking, a couple highlights I would like for you to take away from this slide. So a lot of numbers, a lot of data. I'll try to focus your eyes on what I think is critical on this slide. The first row talks about state reimbursement. This is the reimbursement that we get for those riders that we talked about on the previous slide. It's been steady and consistent at about $29 million a year. If you drop down to the yellow row at the bottom, that's our expenditures for the year. So as you can see, it's escalated over the last 3 years from approximately 51 million to 75 million. I'll tell you why in a second. But I also want us to acknowledge that our expenditures are significantly above what the state reimburses us for transportation. A lot of those funds come directly out of our general funds budget. Two things I want to highlight is our salaries. So you can see there was an increase in salaries from 2023 to 2024, from 2023-24 to 2024-25. Part of that increase was we made some investments in staffing. I'll talk specifically about that, but we realized that we needed to right-size our organization to be able to deal with some of the complexities of our routing system in our model. The second item I want to highlight is purchase services. So that line is predominantly costs that we provide to contract with outside vendors. You can see a significant increase over the last 3 years. We've increased the number of vendors that we contract with at that same time. 2022-23, we had approximately 2. And you fast forward to today, we have 3 bus vendors. We also have 2 van vendors. The other thing that we see in this space is there is, because of supply and demand, there is some cost escalation on what our vendors are charging us to utilize their services. So we're experiencing that as well. The last thing that I want to say is in 23-24, where we were spending $9.1 million on purchase services, that was somewhat masked in that we did have ESSER funds that were captured in a grant funding account as opposed to the general fund account in the tune of approximately $8 million. So we had $8 million in grant funding to support us in 2023-24. That fund hit a cliff this year, and we're absorbing all of those costs in our general funds budget, and that's reflected here. So, starting broadly, just want to talk a little bit about how we stack up against the national comparisons. So if you look at our cost, CCS, Columbus City Schools, spends more on transportation than the national comparison districts. We're at 6.3. The median for the national comparison districts is approximately 4.9. We've been higher than the national comparison for a few years. I anticipate that that will continue, but we are working to bring our costs more in line with some of the comparison districts as we look at the path forward. To bring it a little bit closer to home, we think it's important for us to benchmark against Ohio districts. I share this slide just to highlight the fact that there are a few districts, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Akron, that are pretty close to our size. They have a very similar urban population for the most part, or centralized urban population. And then we have some other districts that we benchmark against, but it's important to recognize that in many cases they're not as large as Columbus City Schools. Nevertheless, it's important to take a look at those districts. So many of you may have seen this slide before. It's not the first time we've presented it to the board. But we looked at our spending as a percentage of our total operating budget. And as you can see, Columbus City Schools versus our peer districts in the state of Ohio is higher than the rest at 6.3% of total operating budget for transportation. This slide takes a look at the proportion of students that we transport versus the other Ohio 8 districts. So, for example, the total enrollment this school year this data was taken from the cost analysis from the Ohio Department of Education for fiscal year 21-22. We also looked at some of our internal metrics. But if you look at the proportion of students, student enrollment, 45,000, total riders, 25,000, the proportion of students for CCS is higher than most of the other Ohio 8 districts as you think about proportion of students that are transported in those districts. To go a little bit deeper in our comparisons, we wanted to pull out a couple of the larger comparison districts. And as you will notice, our miles per assigned bus is approximately double that of Cleveland and Akron. We've touched on a few of those reasons. I will reiterate those reasons that were mentioned by Ms. Freeman, but we drive significantly more miles in our district versus the other large district. And we also have significantly more buses on the road than our comparison districts. If we were able to reduce the number of buses in service, that starts to allow us to bring down some of the cost of our model. And those are some of the things longer term that we will be looking at possibilities on how we can do that. We do believe that there are some cost efficiencies that are attainable in this model moving forward. So I want to get into a little bit of the details. Again, many of you may have seen this slide before. The takeaway is post-COVID, the number of drivers that are available nationally and in the state of Ohio has dropped significantly. The decline in drivers from a state average is approximately 28%. For us at CCS, we're more in line with the national average of a 15% decline. But in 2019, we were at a peak at approximately 786 drivers. We're at approximately half of that for this particular school year. Second part of that story is, although you see a decline in the number of drivers, the number of routes, the purple line on this particular slide, and it's in thousands. So the number of riders that we route have been relatively flat at approximately $37,000 for the last few years. Significant decrease in drivers, significant decrease in routes. The number of riders have been the same. The other thing that I want to call out is if you just think about the number of charter schools that exist today versus the last 5 years, even more so versus the last decade, that number has increased, and we anticipate that that number is going to continue to increase. So technically, we're routing same number of students over more charter schools, more locations. That's the root cause of some of the opportunities that exist as we move forward. This was touched on briefly in the previous conversation, but we also provide transportation in a number of different areas. And I just wanted to call out middle school and after-school athletics. So for sporting events, for games, we provide that transportation to transportation-eligible students. It often involves our drivers being on the road during the evening hours. They have to stay until games are over. So in many instances, football games are ending 8:30, 9 o'clock. Our drivers are taking those students back to their locations. I wanted to highlight this fact and give some shout outs to the fact that we've had some teams in playoffs this year. So I received a few calls over the weekend ensuring that we had transportation available for some of our football teams that were, either rescheduling games or playing in the playoffs. And we're really excited to be able to support the district in that capacity. So if I don't hit my 10-minute mark, it's because of the clicker here.
Here we go.
So as we start to shift into the present, when I came on board in the summer of this year, I was very pleased at some of the great work that the transportation team was doing. I felt like we were really starting to set the foundation for continuous improvement. In front of you are a couple of examples of things that we've done in the last 6 months or so. We've transitioned into a new routing system. We've added tablets and better GPS capabilities to our routes. I know firsthand that our bus drivers significantly appreciate that. We've added some routing alternatives. We continue to explore those, but we've added some vans. We've made an investment in vans into our portfolio of vehicles. And we've also developed a process to review impractical and ineligible determination, focusing on the Ohio Revised Codes that give us guidance on how best to do that. We've developed some workbooks to help us standardize that process. That work continues. So what's a little bit of evidence of success? So one of the things that I want to call out is that anecdotally and based on conversations that I've had since I've entered the district, I hear things about how successful and how good this school year was versus some of the recent start of school years. We take a lot of pride in that work. I think some of the things that we've implemented regarding technology and routing efficiencies have come to fruition. We see that at the number of routes. We've declined from 515 last year to approximately 473 for the first quarter of this year. And we've also expanded some of this work in collaboration with OSPA about how we best assess the laws and regulations about students that are eligible for transportation. And those that don't meet that eligibility, we try to work and find different alternatives for them. Few investments that we made as I start to wrap. We made some investments in technology. Our global positioning system software is updated. I believe it's a really great product. More importantly, we're really starting to get some good data and information out of our routing software. That really helps us continually improve on our routes. We're better able to do comparative analysis. We can route scenarios in what we call our sandbox before we go live with them. This investment in technology is really paying back and providing a return on that investment. And we'll continue to do that for years to come. We've also invested in staff. I touched on this earlier when we were talking about the budget. We realized that we needed to have the appropriate level of staffing in the department. The first thing that we did is we added 20 bus drivers. Those are full-time, 8-hour positions. We increased the number of routers, and we also increased our call center and made sure that we had ample coverage, especially during the beginning of the school year. We think it's important to ensure that as we continue to streamline or try to be more efficient, that we don't lose sight of how important customer service is. That customer service is our principals and our teachers in our schools that we serve. That customer service is also the parents that we serve. And in many instances, the customer service involves, some of the vendors that we work with as well. So these investments not only help us provide more efficient transportation, but it also ensures that we don't lose sight of our customers. Purchased 30 new vans, vehicle investments this year. Those vans have really been helpful for us with special education students. Where it's appropriate, we allow those students to ride with our normal population students or regular population students. But in many instances, you know, if it's one or two individuals, vans are a much more efficient and effective way to transport those students versus having them on a large bus that doesn't have, you know, a full set of student riders on the bus as well. So the path forward, we recognize that there are some things that we can do in the short term. We're really looking at continuing to build organizational capacity. I appreciate the morale and the culture of what I'm experiencing when I visit the transportation terminals in the central office. We need to continue to invest in our people. The people are our biggest asset. We continue to think about how can we provide more efficient routing solutions. We research that. We meet with peer districts to try to figure out some of the things that they're doing. But long term is where I think the true potential value of our continuous improvement program rests. And we're in the process of developing a multi-year strategic roadmap, making sure that we're focusing on the right things at the right time. And we do believe that in conversations like this and moving forward, there's a great opportunity to really take a look at some of our internal practices. Before I close on some potential considerations for down the road, I do want to revisit state minimums on school transportation. So if you review the Ohio Revised Code 3301.07, these are pretty much the minimums that we're required to transport in the district. Grades K through 8 who live more than 2 miles from school district. K through 8. Career technical students, non-public students. We have to ensure that our students are arriving no more than 30 minutes before the start of school and no later than 30 minutes. We pick them up after the dismissal of school. And then we also have to make sure that our special needs students are provided education. Those are the state minimums. This particular code is multiple pages long, but when you peel it back, those are the foundational minimums of what we have to transport based on the Ohio Revised Code. So when you think about opportunities for us to consider as future considerations, there's some conversations today about school choice and the lottery system, why that was put in place historically, what role does it play today. I think those are examples of conversations that we can continue to consider. We know that there are best practices out there that involve hub and spoke models. What that basically entails is, you know, you pick up a large number of students at one hub with multiple buses, and then you dispatch them like a spoke model to the different schools that they attend. So you're not picking up every student at their neighborhood location, but we may have some hubs that we set up to allow us to be more efficient. Regional lottery, bell time adjustments, and, you know, looking at potentially leveraging our CODA partner in helping us transport some of our students. So those are some of the considerations for us to think about as we move forward. I do believe that by revisiting some of our practices, that we can realize some significant cost savings. Remember, those costs come from the general fund, and those funds could potentially be reallocated back into our classroom to move student achievement. That's my presentation, and I will open it up for questions.
So
Thank you.
again, we want to make sure that those questions are related to our lottery program. And also, again, this is informational based, so if you have questions to deepen your understanding of our transportation, some of the processes that were shared, this is the time to pose those questions. So we will open up the floor for questions.
We have a question down here.
Okay, yes, again, committee member
Hello.
Kinney.
Yes, so I have a question about ride times. Kind of what is the average that you're seeing that a student is in the bus in the morning
Yeah.
versus the afternoon? And also, are there differences with elementary, high school, middle, and then also our special needs students?
Yeah, so I can talk in averages, generalities, because like I mentioned, it's complex, so it's yes and yes and yes and yes, right? But generally speaking, and if I speak out of line, please check me on this. I believe last year our ride times were averaging over 65 minutes, some up to 90 minutes. At the beginning of this school year, on average, our ride times were hovering right around 60 minutes. And we feel like, as a parent of one high school daughter now, and the other one graduated, being on the bus longer than an hour is, from my personal perspective, is probably not the most efficient way for us to provide services to our customers. So we feel like hitting that hour mark is right where we need to be on average.
Great question. Additional questions? Dr. Robinson?
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I hope the general public knows that Columbus City Schools has more buses than CODA.
Yes,
You are the largest transportation entity in the state.
thank you,
One in the country.
thank you.
That was very revealing to me with your presentation. So on your slides, you talked about adding vans and special education, nice move. But also with these cost escalations, have you considered decreasing the number of buses to save money?
I mean, that's the goal, that's the intention, right? The question is, how do you do that? So there's a couple ways. So we can decrease just the number of what we call surplus buses, because we do have, we have over 800 buses, approximately 500 are on the road on any given day. So there's 300 buses that are sitting at compounds. So, there's an opportunity for us to maybe take a look at surplus buses. I can tell you the resale value of some of those buses is not significant. However, it is revenue that could be reallocated. And now, given, some of the challenges that other districts and vendors are having, there's an increased interest in potentially leveraging our fleet to provide services. So that could be some type of revenue model worth exploring. Absolutely.
Board Member Cole, you would like to add?
Oh, yes, please, thank you. One of the most significant conversations that we've been having, particularly with our direct report and that of the treasurer, Mr. Cook, is that how do we monetize our assets? And I've said this before in the past, but not privatize, monetize our assets. How do we utilize them in a way that generates revenue that we otherwise would not receive? The other part is maintenance, replacement, recycle. We still need to be able to do that. Whether those buses are sitting there or not, we still need to be able to do that. I think that gives us some added flexibility. The one thing I want to challenge all of us to think of in this committee is revenue and how we have to draw that down and how do we answer the question of transportation when we're thinking about student population, student enrollment. We understand very clearly in this organization that we have to increase student enrollment to increase our annual revenues, particularly from the state of Ohio. So we can't think from a deficit model anymore. We can't. We realize what the challenges are with staff, human capital. We realize where those challenges are. But at the end of the day, if we want to be sustainable, if we want to take the tax bite off of Joe and Jane taxpayer, mine went up a couple grand a year in property tax. If we want to take that bite off and lessen that impact on Joe and Jane taxpayer here in the city of Columbus, we have to increase our student capacity. We have to reclaim students in the district. So how do we think about that transportation question when we're actually not looking at it from a deficit perspective, but actually from an increasing perspective? Just something to put in you all's laps and just really think that through as we continue these conversations.
Thank you so much for that. Additional questions? Board Member Adair, you have more to add?
Yeah, Yes, thank you. And what Board Member Cole was speaking of is a lot of the work that the Equitable Transparent Resource Management Committee will be working on, and it's incredibly important. Mr. Woods, can we go back to the future consideration slide? And kind of talking about the order in which you've put these up here with lottery, hub and spoke, regional, bell time, and then the city transportation. Yeah. I just want to put a plug in for this last one. Dakota has an issue on the ballot, and the better we have transportation in this city, the easier it is for our students who are citizens in this community, riders in this community. They have access to public education, can get around. So plug in for that issue, supporting that issue, because it helps CCS. But I'm wondering how we get to this order, and I know we don't have actual numbers, but we have a lot of dollar signs up there with the lottery. And maybe you can help us kind of tie in the presentation we just heard to what you're kind of, why this one here is on top when we're talking about lottery. Yeah. Like, why does lottery, in your mind, as the transportation, why is this up high?
So for me, it comes down, we brainstormed the list first of all, and then we really thought about kind of order of magnitude, right? If we were to implement these, what should have the potential biggest impact on our cost structure? And just given the sheer number of miles that we drive, that was highlighted in one of the presentations, and the sheer number of buses that we have on the street on any given day, the most impactful way to address miles and the number of buses has to do with looking at our school choice model and how we implement that practice. So that's why I've given it kind of, relatively speaking, 4 stars or 5 stars. And then you go down the list from there.
And we appreciate that. Thank you so much. And that is actually a good segue into the next agenda item. Are we ready to pull up that PowerPoint presentation? Our previous meeting, we were given a program assessment draft that was presented by our internal auditor to give us a lens through which to make decisions through this committee. And hopefully you all still have that copy of that. If you don't have the copy of that, there are copies on your desk, or there should be copies in front of you. We're going to pull up. Yes, but can they pull up the PowerPoint? So let's give them a second here to see if they're pulling up that PowerPoint for us. Here we go. So again, our Academic and Facility Alignment Committee. So we want to start off with our purpose. The purpose of this committee, next slide please, is to assist the board in ensuring that the district maintains a shared value of academic excellence that aligns our curriculum, our staff development, safety and security measures, facility planning and management, and technology integration in support of our district goals, guardrails, strategic plan, and portrait of a graduate. The committee thus shall oversee all the district's construction projects within the facility's master plan and make recommendations to the Columbus Board of Education prior to a vote to appropriate funds. Then it becomes important, given that we are grounded in what the purpose of this committee is, to establish a framework through which to make decisions. A framework is a structured approach or a set of guiding principles and tools used to organize, analyze, and make decisions. The framework provides a consistent, logical structure for evaluating recommendations, identifying priorities, and again, in making decisions. Why have we started with a framework in this committee? Again, why have we started with a framework in this committee? We want to provide a structure through which our administration can come and present future considerations, recommendations, and information to us. At the same time, we want to promote consistency. As we said, or I said often in our last meeting, we want to make sure that our administration understands the goalposts, that it's not always changing on them. We want to enhance the objectivity of how we are analyzing and evaluating the information. We want to ensure that we are looking at this through a very objective lens. We want to help to improve efficiency and support accountability. Again, a framework provides that consistency, that structure that will move us to align our decisions with the mission and the vision of the district, with our goals and guardrails and our strategic plan. With that in mind, again, last meeting we presented the program activity information sheet. And over the course of, since that time, over the course of the last couple of months, we have received a lot of feedback as it relates to the challenges and opportunities. I would like to applaud and thank our internal auditor, Mr. Kevin O'Connor, for being able to meet with our students who I'm assuming are visiting from
Ohio State.
the Ohio State University. So we were a whole case study for a recent class at Ohio State. They had the opportunity to meet with our internal auditor and share a lot of their feedback. At the same time, we had a lot of feedback come in from the administration, and so we also thank administration for being able to share their feedback. Our board members as well have shared their feedback and want to ensure that there is not an overlap of work that is being done on the part of the internal auditor's office and also on the part of our administration. And so again, that feedback that came to us again highlighted the challenges of the program and activity information sheet, but also highlighted some opportunities in being able to structure questions. I want to open up the floor just to provide a couple of minutes for our committee members, because this is your opportunity to share some of your feedback as it relates to that program activity information sheet. Again, as it might relate to challenges or opportunities for that particular document. Yes. Board Member Adair.
Thank you. I really appreciate the framework that you outlined on your slide. Sorry. Thank you. And agree that I think a framework is really important. My concern, though, is that, and I said this last time we were in the meeting, that really I think that you're proposing a governance kind of question that all committees should maybe be thinking about. And so I would really like for our Policy Governance Committee to take a look at this, because like I said, I think it's important that however we are working with the administration, we do it consistently across the committees, so that, you know, we are all doing the same thing. Because, for example, Mr. Woods is coming to ETRM to do that transportation presentation in a few weeks as well. And so making sure that we are sharing and having the same information across committees, I think, is important. And so I would like it to be part of a standard governance structure, and recommend that it be moved over to that committee for further discussion, development, and adoption.
Thank you so much for that. If we could go to the next slide to give by way of example. This is the Policy and Facilities Committee. Our purpose is very different than the ETRM Committee, very different from the Policy and Governance Committee. The purpose of our committee is to focus on how decisions and recommendations affect academic outcomes. Using an example of policy governance, that committee is focused on how policies and legal constraints impact the decisions and recommendations that the board makes. And so in that regard, while administration can present the same presentations to multiple committees, different committees should have a different framework through which they are making their decisions. we, as an academic and facilities committee, should not be making policy decisions. Those decisions should really be with policy governance. So in this particular moment, I do think it is a yes and moment that there can be a standardized template by which the administration can present information to us, but there is a different framework that this committee needs to take when interpreting that information and making a decision. I open the floor for additional comment and feedback.
I have an additional comment, Dr. Pierce. I do respectfully disagree with that because what each committee is designed to do is effectuate the board work, and all of our committees have to work together to answer the larger policy questions because we govern. And so what this piece of paper, with this actual form that has been put together, is a governance structure. I don't disagree with the framework, and I completely agree with you that every committee uses a lens that it is designed to within its charter. So I agree with that. What I'm disagreeing with is that I don't believe this committee has the authority to adopt or create a governance document
I totally agree with that.
that every committee could be using. So that's why I'm suggesting that this question be moved over to the governance part of policy and governance so that every committee is doing the same thing as we use our own lenses to answer the question.
So I think we're saying the same thing because we are saying we want to get to a point where every committee is developing a framework and a lens through which to make decisions. So I'll walk you through this next PowerPoint. And this is a framework where we can explore new recommendations. So today, we received 2 presentations. And at the end of the presentation, one of the future considerations that we will have to tackle as a committee is, do we change the process for our lotteries? Do we change the process for our lotteries? Now, understanding that if there are policies that are related to how that process happens, those policies will get the deep dive in policy governance. However, what I'm proposing in this committee is that we have a framework for really just exploring how would those changes to the lottery system impact student outcomes? How will those changes to the lottery system impact make unintended consequences or challenges if they're being implemented? So this framework right here offers 4 basic questions for us to explore when we are looking at existing programs, if a policy is kicked to us, anything that is currently existing. What I am offering on the floor is that we look through this framework to explore anything that is currently existing, understanding that we can put additional questions on there. But the first question is, does the recommendation align with the district's mission, vision, and strategic goals? Second question, what evidence or data indicates the recommendation's impact on outcomes, usage, and satisfaction? The third question, are there unintended consequences or challenges since it's been implemented? That last question is feedback from stakeholders. Have we talked to our stakeholders? In today's presentations, even around the lottery process, what we're understanding is that we have a number of great schools that are offering great academic programs that are furthering the mission, the values, and our strategic goals. We were also given a lot of evidence and data that indicates we're starting to see some impact, and that impact is happening with transportation, right? That third question, are there unintended consequences or challenges since it's been implemented? Correct me if I'm wrong, but we have changed that process several times over, and it sounded like we are quite due for another change. Am I correct in that, administration?
I would say yes.
You would say yes, right? Now, that final question there about what feedback from stakeholders has influenced the recommendation. And again, today we weren't given recommendations, but we understand there's an opportunity here for this committee to dive a little bit deeper into our lottery process, because one, we know that it's straining our system transportation-wise, and we know that we want to do a better job of providing equitability and academic opportunities for our students. But we would lean for that fourth question into Board Member Cole's committee, which is community engagement, to help us understand how can we get some real good contextual feedback from our community around the lottery process and how we're doing it. Committee member Kinney asked a great question about information to our elementary students. We might want to get more information around, are our elementary students actually getting the information that they need to pick the right schools that they want to pick during the lottery process? Do they understand when the lottery process application period is going to open up if they're new to our district, if they're moving in, if they don't have a neighbor that has young kids, right? So we might want to dig deeper into that. So again, the idea is that while every committee will be able to identify what their particular framework is, in this committee, I am offering that we start to explore existing work that we're doing through this framework. And then if we go to another slide, we also offer one for, go back to new, exploring what could be new. We have another framework of 4 additional questions that we could, again, ask and use as we make decisions around new programs, new things that are brought through the district. I see heads nodding. Feedback, thoughts, ideas. Again, this is for the Academic and Facilities Committee, Alignment Committee, to think about, again, how we are making decisions.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of questions, because there was a comment earlier that even, the administration brought to me in terms of this idea of redundancy, so that the committee isn't overdoing what internal audit is doing. Understanding that you've been a part of the process of designing this framework, correct? So this is a co-design, collaborative piece. How does this align with your calendar work for Office of Internal Audit?
Well, what I did was provided a tool to Dr. Pierce. So this isn't what we do in internal audit. This was just some examples of how we would assess some programs if we were lining up programs to evaluate. And there were questions and things we would document to consider, is that a success? Is it not? Why isn't it? Why is it? Et cetera.
Okay, so with that in mind, what work do you all do in terms of program evaluation? Is there work that you guys have calendarized, that you guys are developing right now to actually assess or evaluate programs within the district?
Not programs, no. Okay. We have risk, we're all about risk. So the risk to certain programs that would prevent the district from achieving its goals, guardrails, strategic priorities, portrait of a graduate, those risks, we would hone in on the work to identify those risks, make sure that we have proper mitigation strategies in place to prevent that risk from being a speed bump to the district on meeting their goals.
All right. Is there any way in which you see this framework augmenting, supporting what you're doing in that space that you just identified?
If we evaluate it as part of our risk assessment, it might add an additional lens that we could use when we identify risk.
Okay, okay. So, and just help me as clarification, the way that I'm seeing this is, especially now that it's been distilled to, 8 questions.
8 questions.
Right, 8 questions it's been distilled to. What I'm seeing is one, if I'm distilling this down to substantive things that we're trying to get in terms of outcomes of this, one is alignment in terms of fidelity to our goals and guardrails. Is that correct? That
That's
this is something that aligns to the goals that we've established and the guardrails that we established along with the superintendent?
Yes.
Okay. This also is something that helps us look substantively, a little more substantively from a committee standpoint, without governing the board, but a committee standpoint. This helps us look at academic achievement, student outcomes from a different lens that isn't as, or doesn't necessarily have to be as data rich as what we would get in a monitoring report.
Exactly.
Is that correct?
Exactly.
But it could supplement a monitoring report?
It could.
I'm just trying to make some dots and connections here because I hear my colleagues' concern about this idea of governance, kind of doing our work versus actually doing something that's going to help us be more data-driven. So I'm thinking about this outcome as us being more data-driven in this space. This is a repository of information. Tonight is an example of that, how we saw something, and now we have the opportunity to deliberate substantively on it, on what it is we uplift to the board to bring into consideration when we have further deliberation. I just want to be clear. Is that what I'm saying correctly?
Exactly what you're saying. And so, again, I think we'll think of,
Can I just clarify, just because I actually love the framework. I love these 8 questions,
okay.
okay? And I actually think they apply to every committee because they are what we do. It's driven by student outcomes. I guess what I'm concerned, and maybe I missed it, maybe we're not proposing the 8-page questionnaire anymore. That's the thing that I'm concerned about.
So the 8-page questionnaire, when the internal auditor shared that, he shared with us the lens through which his office is auditing, and that's an example of a program audit. That, I'm pretty sure I said, that gets your mind thinking about the questions, the data that we should be wanting when we're making decisions. Understanding, again, that there are some spaces where you could probably go through and answer all the questions on page 1 and 2. Some topics or areas you might not be able to answer the questions on page 2. You might be able to answer the questions on page 1 and 3, right? That should have just got your mind going around, here's the type of information that we need to make a decision. So what I did with those pages was took them and distilled them down into very broad, general, 8 questions. We have the bullet points there as well. And based upon these 8 questions, and going back to the future consideration that was posed, because I will tell our committee that our next meeting, it is our hope that we will have recommendations and considerations from administration as it relates to lottery system transportation. What I offer is that when we are determining how to make the decision, we use the 4 questions that are there within the framework for exploring.
If I can, Madam Chair, just quickly, I appreciate how these subject areas are headed: planning, communication, monitoring. Perhaps maybe then it's the opportunity for every committee to get a chance to choose from this which it would be. For me, communication would be one of those things.
That's what we did. So this committee kept it very narrowly focused on academic outcomes, how it's aligned to our goals and guardrails. As it becomes to probably, I would say, President Adair's committee, you would probably focus more on the monitoring aspect and maybe even that other piece.
So I appreciate the
If you want to look at the
example.
professional development piece,
Yep, in short,
there's going to be different areas that y'all would want to look at.
all right, yeah, in short, I appreciate the opportunity for other committees to look at this example of what your office would then evaluate or take a look at as consideration for us to ask these more substantive questions in our spaces. So yeah, I'm happy to own communications, or I'm certainly sure that Board Member Ingalls would be more than happy to own various portions of the planning piece. For example, are the written procedures maintained in a central repository and easily retrievable by staff? Or are there written procedures maintained for program processes? So that would be a space of not just policy, but superintendent.
Records keep being.
No.
Retention.
There's another, administrative guideline. That's what I'm thinking of, AG, administrative guideline. This is an AG space, but still would be taken under consideration in Sarah Engel's committee. So it makes sense. I think I like to look at this further and own what it is that my committee can own, and I think it would be great for others to do the same. So it sounds like we're on the same page.
Do we have feedback from committee members? This is your first time seeing the questions, as well as board members, their first time seeing the questions as well.
I'd say just being a committee member, I do appreciate how structured this is, because for somebody that's coming in from the outside, being able to have a tool to utilize to keep us kind of, try to keep us focused on our overall goal is very helpful.
Additional feedback? We have our guest from Ohio State. Would you guys like to give any feedback? The class spokesman. Okay. And so, again, what I will offer is that this framework is a living document. Again, we are going to be making decisions about very complex topics and issues that our district is dealing with. We want to make sure that we are focused on the academic aspect of that, the facility impact of that. We want to lean into the work of our other committees. Again, we have Board Member Adair and Board Member Cole. We can't do this work alone. We will definitely be able to lean in and say, Board, we have thought very deeply about how it's going to impact academic outcomes and facilities. We are very confident that Board Member Cole and his committee will be out there connecting with the community and making sure that the community understands the extent through which we're dealing with tough and complex issues. And then we will also ensure that, again, Board Member Adair and her committee will be ensuring that we are seeking to get equity in the work that we are doing. And of course, Board Member Ingalls will make sure that we are providing good, sound governance, that our policies are meeting all the state and city codes as well.
If I may, Madam Chair, I think what's even more critically important is that we're taking this opportunity to drive the administration towards a collaborative vision, a shared vision. I'm about to get Kouzes and Posner on you guys, leadership challenge. We got to get a vision moving forward that actually we're using this data to drive us in the direction that we're trying to go. So at the end of the day, I definitely want us to leave not just with this idea of framework, but the outcome or the substance of framework designed to create a shared vision that's going to lead us into the future. So I just want to make sure we leave with that in mind as well.
And with that, I will accept a motion to adopt the framework. Again, it's 8 questions that we will use to make decisions as the administration brings recommendations and considerations to us. Is there a motion to adopt the framework?
Can I have a clarification? So with this framework, with the new and the existing slides, those are the 2 8 questions. Are we having a motion to just adopt a framework, or this is the framework?
I'm saying this is the framework. We can definitely adjust it.
Can we
And I
see-
don't even think we need to adopt it, but do we have a commitment that we will establish this as our framework?
Can I see the other slide? Sorry, because
Can they pull the other slide up?
Because it's this really tiny print. That's why I just
And
wanted
I
to
think there
read.
should be, that one under existing, it should be, has the recommendation affected specific groups or resources.
And to be clear, you said this is a living document, which
Yes.
means that adjustments can be made. This is just a
Yes.
start.
This is just a start. This is the first time we've ever done this.
I just have
Dr.
a comment,
Robinson?
since this is a live document. You know, anytime we talk about stakeholders, particularly in the community, I think we have to list parents. It says
We do
student-
not have parents.
Yeah, parents are very significant in what we're doing.
We could update that and put parents, change policy, and put recommendation. Thank you for catching that. Additional feedback? Okay.
Madam Chair, I think for me, I think it'd be helpful just in this, just a slightly further discussion, that you guys are comfortable, A, with the idea of framework. It seems that you are. Everybody feels comfortable with the idea of a framework. I'm kind of looking at everybody. Okay. Secondly, that in the modification space, how often do you anticipate us making these types of revisions, or do you feel like you need a little more time to look this over and be more clear about it and then offer your feedback to our liaison and to our chair? Do you feel like you need a little more time to look at it?
I do not.
Okay.
I like the 8 questions, and I think I would like to recommend that next meeting, you said that we're going to have some recommendations, and that we use that process to improve the document and to refine it.
Okay.
And I was going to say the same thing. I would like to see it in motion, see how it works through one of the models that we have, and then we'll know what to adjust or what is needed. So I agree.
Thank you, thank you. Other feedback? Okay. So do we have to take a vote? I don't even think we have to take a vote. Okay. So, Mr. Williams, can you please communicate to our administration that we will be happy to receive recommendations and considerations at our next meeting as it relates to transportation related to lottery choice. Transportation related to lottery choice. And please share with them, these are the 8 questions. Well, it's really 4 questions because these are existing programs that we have. These are the 4 questions that we're going to be looking at.
And Madam Chair, if I may, I think if it's the will of the committee to move forward with a framework, I think that we should say that we are making a commitment to the framework.
Okay.
I think we should vote.
I agree, we can vote on it, but also like, I know the hour's getting late, but see, you have a question up there. Does this recommendation align with the district's mission, values, and strategic goals? I wonder if we decide no, it doesn't.
So then that's the feedback that we're giving to the administration, that they probably need to go back and rework that recommendation because it does not align. So I know you all gave a great presentation on our lottery programs, but I forget who posed the question. Dr. Kellogg, I think you posed the question to say, how did we come up with these programs? And Board Member Coe gave the great response to it. But in selecting and establishing programs, is it okay that we are doing that based upon parents, community members, and stakeholders making presentations to the board to say, I want this program? Does that align with the workforce and the development of workforce that we see in our state, right? So it might be the case that we say, we do need to rethink this lottery process. We do need to rethink how we're establishing these alternative schools within our district, because sometimes they're not aligning with where we see our workforce development within the state going. Just as an example. And hopefully administration, I know they have a lot of ideas for academic programs and new stuff that they want to bring to the district, so hopefully that was an okay example to use.
I just have a clarifying question, since we keep talking about administration. So is the expectation that we will have these questions answered, or we just bring the recommendation and then there's dialogue in this committee around those questions?
That is exactly what it is. You bring the presentation, you bring the data, and we have the dialogue using these questions.
Thank you.
I still think, though, the administration should think more in terms, just from the standpoint of preparation and time and execution, that you should use these as some measure of your guiding assumptions. These are, I think, a safe space for some measure of guiding assumptions, just something that could be incorporated in how you design and plan around. And again, this is shared. This is not something that's indifferent. We have goals and guardrails that ensure equity. We have goals and guardrails that ensure certain segments of these questions that that help guide the work. So I think that you should use these in some measure as guiding assumptions in preparation to have a conversation with the committee. I hope I'm making sense. I'm seeing some eyes that question, I don't know.
Yeah, can I add to that? Because so I have a point with that, is that with, like, for example, the first question, if we're asking for the administration to share using these frameworks, then they're going to tell us what they think. No offense to the administration, but the administration could say, no, we decide transportation, that totally aligns, instead of giving the committee the time to think about, does it align? For us to question.
Nope, I understand. I think the win-win of it is, well, let me move to rephrase. I think the competitive advantage that we have is that we have a set of goals and we have a set of guardrails already codified that we can always refer back to. That's where the question comes in. Are we certain that we're doing blah, blah, blah in accordance to the guardrail that we said? I think that's how we can look at it moving forward in the conversation. And that's why it's all the more important that the administration is prepared by using these questions as guiding principles.
And I think today's presentation was just that. So if we were to answer question 1, based upon, we might need to reconsider our practices for the lottery system. Question 1, does that align with the district's mission, vision, values, and strategic plan? Yes, we want to provide these programs. We want to make sure that there are alternative programs within our district. But I think where it got complex was question number 2, when Mr. Woods started to share that data around the strain that it's creating for transportation. So as a committee, we have to dive deep into that value system and say, do we want to sacrifice some of the opportunities that we are giving our students to be able to explore programs outside of their region because it's straining our transportation system? So by question number 2, that's where the rubber meets the road for this committee. We have to really start thinking about, okay, how much of that are we willing to say? Is it the 2-mile radius? Is it within your region? Is it not within your region? Is it a certain type of student? Are we holding spaces for certain students? Because we know that transportation issue is there. I also heard us getting to that unintended consequences with Ms. Caslin Turner asked the question about special education. What are the unintended consequences? When we make the recommendation that says, okay, let's change this lottery process because we want to ease up on transportation a little bit, how many of those special education students might not have access to a program? And I even thought about it from the perspective of our ELL families that are coming to central enrollment to just help to go through the process. Do we then provide those services in the regions for them to ease up the transportation for those families so they don't have to always come down to central enrollment? Are we designating a school within the region or the area where they might have a satellite office every now and then? So again, I think we got to some of those unintended consequences. But again, I think it provides a framework for us to be able to explore how are we making the decision? Because again, at the board table, sometimes we have limited time to make those decisions. And that's why they want the recommendations to come through all of our committees, because they know we've thought deeply about academic outcomes and how it's impacting our facilities. Adair has thought deeply about how it's going to affect equity. Ingalls is thinking very deeply about, are we breaking the law? Is it within the code and the charter? And then, of course, Cole is making sure that he's connecting it all to the community and to our stakeholders.
Can I ask, when I'm thinking about Mr. Woods' presentation, it was so rich with information and data. And for me, as a committee member, to take all of that in and then make data-driven decisions that are aligned with our vision and goals, like that takes time. And so my question is there any way that the administration can front-load us with some information so that we can come prepared to the table to then listen with an open ear and already have some questions in mind that may be answered during their presentations, but maybe not. because I did feel a little overwhelmed with the amount of information, with the way I think.
Thank you for that. I take that as a compliment. I mean, I think information and data is critical in decision-making. But, you know, I like the conversation, and it does take time. I believe some of the information and data would need to be discussed as opposed to just handed over. So how I've seen this environment work is some of these conversations are multi-meeting conversations, right? So, you know, it may take a couple meetings for us to get to some hard recommendations that the team wants to take forward to the board. But I think having that working session in this committee meeting, I think is valuable. I'm a little hesitant about just providing the data without the context or the voiceover, because that might be even more confusing.
Could we take it in bite-sized chunks then? So knowing that we need to make a recommendation to the board as it relates to lottery and transportation, is there a way that administration can give us a bite-sized chunk of where a pain point is for our district?
Administration?
Dr. Klein, anybody, Dr.
Yeah,
Anybody?
I have a perspective, but I want to make sure other perspectives are captured as well. Yeah, I think, you know, I think we could work offline to try to figure out what's the bite-size, what's the right level of content to bring to this committee. I think we can do that, yes.
Okay.
But that's my perspective. Do you have any comments or questions?
I think we need to work together as an administrative team to make decisions, especially when I look at what feedback from stakeholders influence a recommendation. I have to have time to get that information. We've been trying to change the lottery for a number of years, but this is the first time, and I about fainted, Dr. Pierce, when you said at the next meeting, I'm going, because you know I'm a pleaser and I'm going to get it done, but my goodness, these are thousands of lives, and this is a total community switch. So we are going to need time and patience. And we need to work with our colleagues in transportation, because you may or may not know, 8 years ago, we made a recommendation with transportation to change the lottery completely and put it into quadrants. And it was turned down by our Board of Education. So it's important to me that we work together so that I can talk to him, talk to Maurice about how much transportation is too much. And could we do it in quarter chunks so that everyone would have equitable opportunities, but yet we would still have choice?
Can I tell you how much I just love this dialogue? Because just being able to be vulnerable and admit we don't have all the feedback that we need from the community to make this decision, that's huge in itself, to say, okay, we don't have that feedback right now, so we can't really dive deeply into that question, but we can bite-size this, chunk off a piece of a larger decision. I appreciate that, and I think that is so helpful. That is useful and helpful information to take back to the board. I do.
I agree with
Dr.
Mrs.
Robertson?
Whitfield. We need data and something in advance
Okay.
to read, to process, to reflect. The presentation that Mr. Woods did today, I could have gotten that in advance and looked at it and read it. And I understand that, you know, we're still working on it, but I need something in advance to think about. And one last comment is that I hope that I keep hearing the community being amplified. You know, this meeting has a very strong board corporate feel to it. And I know that Mr. Cole has a committee that has community engagement. So whatever we do, I would hope that the community has some input before we start voting and making decisions.
Agreed. Speaking of the vote, we still did not take a vote. So can we do the roll call vote on establishing the framework that is a living document that we will give room to be revised and changed? We will not say that it has to be revised or changed by a certain timeline. It will be organic, but we will make the commitment that we will establish the 8-question framework. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, roll call.
Who's the second?
Beth was second.
Kenny?
Dr. Pierce,
Yes.
Ms. Adair,
Yes.
Mr. Cole,
Yes.
Mr. Bean,
Yes.
Ms. Turner,
Yes.
Dr. Kellogg,
Yes.
Ms. Kinney,
Yes.
Dr. Levine,
Yes.
Mr. Robertson,
Yes.
Ms. Whitfield.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you all so much. And so again, being mindful of time, we look forward to our administration bringing us back those consideration and recommendations, sending us some information in advance so we can make an informed decision. At this point, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
I'm sorry, who's first?
Adair, Cole.
Okay, Dr. Pierce,
Yes.
Ms. Adair,
Yes.
Mr. Cole,
Yes.
Mr. Bean,
Yes.
Ms. Turner,
Yes.
Dr. Kellogg,
Yes.
Ms. Kinney,
Yes.
Levine,
Yes.
Mr. Robertson,
Yes.
Ms. Whitfield. Motion carried.
Thank you all very much, and we look forward to seeing you at our next committee meeting and our next board meeting, which will be Wednesday, am I correct in that? Wednesday, November 6th, at 3700 South High Street.
For those who've not had the opportunity to cast their ballots and vote, please vote tomorrow. I'm going to the polls tomorrow.